I call the City of Escalon Recreation Commission meeting of April 2nd, 2025 to order at 6:30 p.m. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will staff please do roll call?
Commissioner Bauer? Commissioner Silva? Here. Chair Trejo?
Here.
Commissioner Hogan? Here. Commissioner Showalter?
Here.
We will move on to consent calendar. The first item we have is approve the minutes from the Recreation Commission special meeting of March 5th, 2025. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Or do we need more time to review it?
Motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
All right. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. We have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right. Hearing none, the motion passes to approve the minutes for the special meeting of March 5th. The second consent calendar item is to approve the minutes from the Recreation Commission regular meeting of March 5th, 2025.
I'll motion to approve the regular meeting minutes.
We have a motion to approve it. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. We got a first and a second to approve the minutes from the Recreation Commission regular meeting of March 5th, 2025. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right. Hearing none, the motion is approved. We will now move to staff communications. Agenda item number 3, monthly recreation update, March 2025.
Good evening, Chair. Jalen French. Before you, like every month, is the recreation update. It talks about some of the issues ongoing, talks about some of the numbers for the programs, and is there for you and the public's reference. I will just touch on a couple of topics, and maybe this is more like staff communication, but a couple of things we'll talk about. We, in all sports, start to lose participation in the later years. So one of the things that we're exploring is, some options. The next season coming up is soccer. One of the options we're exploring for the older kids, 14 to however old, is joining MYSA just for that age group, because MYSA does have a league that goes all the way to 17. So this would be, yes, an Escalon program, and probably what we would do if we got enough kids would create a team, an Escalon team, and sort of port that team to MYSA. So an Escalon group is playing against MYSA kids. MYSA is their own program, of course, so the cost would be the MYSA cost, not our cost. The MYSA cost is much more than our cost. We think it's a good option. We think it's something to explore, but there may be some questions or even some concerns about that. We want to provide it as an option and not, a necessity, of course. The other alternative is if we get less than, 3 teams at least, we just don't have that division, right? We just don't play. So something we're exploring, what we'll do in these reports and under staff communication in general is start to float ideas in front of you so that you can think about it, maybe even, poll people, get a reaction, and then as an item comes forward, you'll have more background, more knowledge base. So that's one thing. I guess we can pause for any comments if there are any, or we can keep going.
What's the enrollment difference?
MYSA for early bird is 200. And ours is 70 something. So not a little amount.
Would we use their facilities then? They would be like in their league then?
It would be in their league, 100%, yes. That team would play at the MYSA facilities. It wouldn't be this, sort of travel back and forth. It would be them playing in that league.
And then obviously this is all just hypothetical at this point, but say we didn't have enough, there was 2 teams or something, they could both be submitted, we wouldn't have to cut kids,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay, got it,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good plan to explore. When I think about certain age groups, like for baseball, for example, you got the toddlers and the rookies that are between 4 and 8 years old. I think a lot of times the parents are wanting to have a program here in Escalon, but there's plenty of kids that do sign up where you can. But once you get to about 12 years old, you're in about 7th grade at that time, and if you join the Escalon team, whether it's wrestling, track, basketball, now you have an Escalon team, and you go to other towns to compete. And if you're talking about this age group of 13, 14, that is that norm for that age group to be doing that, to kids to be an Escalon team together and go compete in other cities. So I think it'd be very aligned with what you see with sports at the same age group with the Escalon community and Escalon School District.
One more quick, sorry, Danny. Another thing I was just wondering, it doesn't interfere, I played fall soccer, high school is not fall here, right? It's like, it wouldn't interfere and those kids could potentially play this where, I don't,
Part of the reason we have declining enrollment is, one, kids pick a sport, kids lose interest in sport, or kids at that age start to play for their school programs. So this would be, the sort of sweet spot of kids who still want to play, can't maybe make their team for whatever reason, and they want to play. And that's why we have such a small number. We hate to turn kids away, so we're at least exploring other options.
got it, okay. But if you were playing, it wouldn't interfere anyways, right? If you were
playing a high school sport, it would interfere.
it would,
I believe at least practice schedules. Yeah, I think it would interfere.
okay,
Yeah.
Maybe not game schedules, but practice schedules.
okay.
Most
Yeah, and I think you're right. It would interfere. I think about when we do flag football, even soccer, there are a lot of kids who sign up for the youth Cougars, and sometimes they prioritize that over flag football and soccer. But that's just kind of a given that what happened is they're trying to focus in on that. But I don't really see it as an issue with some of the coaches where if they miss a kid here and there for youth Cougars, it ends up being a big issue for them. They're able to work around that.
Great. So laundry list of items here in no particular order. The city was successful in receiving a grant from, I can read it here, the National Recreation and Park Association, thanks to Yvette's good work. We did receive a $2,500 grant. The intent of the program is to train as many coaches as possible. Their goal is 1 million coaches. They provide grants for people to train within the program. So we did receive that grant. How we intend to use it in some manner is encourage up to 100 coaches to participate in this training. And they'll get some offset, either in a registration fee or in a gift card or something to take the training. Now we would love to and are encouraging the trainings to be mandatory. It's available. We should all take it. Obviously, the award is limited, so we'll have to kind of figure that out. But I think this is a good thing. One of the things that we've heard in the past is support for coaches, trainings for coaches, because small program, a lot of parents may not have the expertise in any one sport. The more training you can get, the better. So we've been exploring grant opportunities. And the other thing is more and more programs are requiring more and more trainings, concussion, CPR, even things like appropriate interactions with kids, right? All of these things. And so in the past, we've had pushback to requiring fingerprinting and those types of things by a small group, but still pushback. And we'd like to push more trainings to coaches, recognizing that everyone's a volunteer, right? But safety has got to be paramount. And so we would encourage more training. But again, one of these ideas that will float up, and we can kind of have a discussion as a community and as a commission about the level of training, like, well, this is too much, not enough, all that. All right, for adult softball, historically we've had 10 teams. We had desire for 12 teams. We did add those 2 additional teams. We may have to do double headers sometimes, so there may be a later game starting at 9, but we think that's better than starting earlier because most people are working or have work schedules. So we may periodically play like a 9 o'clock game. But it's good to see 12 adult teams signed up. Perhaps not a comfortable conversation, but one of the things that we need to continue to look at, field space is increasingly becoming an issue for practice. We are working with the school district to see if there's a partnership that we could have with some of the school facilities. But in the meantime, one of just the other dynamics out there is the youth Cougars, and they rent part of the field during what season? Well, during their football season, but it's our flag football? Soccer. During our soccer season. And, there's limited space out there for everyone. And so we're not suggesting anything, and just, again, raise a conversation to say, eventually, how do we want to, handle the number of teams that we have and the field space available.
Did anyone lease the 18 acres next door?
No. It's dirt. Not smooth dirt. Not yet. Okay. Food for thought. And then just a note, the community pool is no longer active, and I do not think will be active into the future. That is not something that the school district has wanted to maintain, or the city hasn't had the ability to maintain full. We had a partnership, so just if there's anyone in the community who's not aware that will not be opening this year or likely into the future, just wanted to make that note to you and to the public. And that's all the items we had under that item.
Thank you, staff. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, monthly communication log.
So I'll just continue, I think second month here. One of the ideas raised by Commissioner Hogan was that any comments, questions, concerns that we receive sort of get shared up with the Recreation Commission so that people know, one, they're being addressed by more than just staff. The issues are sort of being daylighted. So we will continue to share a log like this. It'll be long or it'll be short each month with you all. And we can address it how you'd like. We can talk about each one if you want. We can, pull out themes. We can just move on. It's really at your discretion how you'd like to handle it. Now, what we have done and what we'll continue to do is invite the providers of comments to the meeting if they want to, share additional thoughts as well. We have the list here of a couple of, almost 10 items. A couple of them are surrounding topics that we'll talk about later, and largely from these comments are the reason we'll talk about them later. So again, we can address how you'd like to address.
And just a question on the first item there, the one dated March 6th from Coach Aaron Calderon.
Yep.
I'm assuming they're referring to baseball and softball, and not the boys' visors, but the boys' baseball hats is what they're referring to.
Correct.
Because in the visor is just similar color, but just not a logo on there.
Not logoed, yeah.
We actually have children in the audience today.
So as I understand it, and Yvette, correct me if I'm wrong, the softball teams went with college teams, and it's a little more difficult to secure visors that have the college teams on them versus it's easier to pre-order or pre-buy baseball hats with the pro teams on them. And so it was always proposed to us, meaning the proposal that we received from Anna Baker and her shop was always to have no logo on the softball visors.
Thank you. And then for the next one they had on there for March 6th from Sid Ramirez, talking about how they had a scheduled practice on March 7th, but there's another coach scheduled there. On March 8th. And was there anything that the city investigated on for that, or what was determined from there? Or?
The specific day was when the minors reverted back to Escalon. So because, the majors had their practice set for Saturdays, they weren't counting on the minors coming back and playing games. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was just thinking, I thought for the minors, they had this, when they did their practice schedule, they had it listed as like 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. for their practice schedules. And then the games were scheduled same time, 8 to 10 a.m. So from that, I guess it wouldn't be a schedule conflict because the minors are doing their games during their pre-practice scheduled time. So I wonder if there's maybe something potentially different than that.
I don't recall the reason. That was the reason I remember. There was I don't remember the exact reason, but from what I remember, that was the reason. I know that the games are scheduled for 2 hours. Your minor practices are also scheduled for 2 hours, correct?
Yes, yeah, 8 a.m. and 10 a.m.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at my notes and see the main reason why. And if that's not
The other one too is when we do schedule games on Tuesdays, the teams that have the Field B scheduled is the A's and the Giants, both minors teams. So there wouldn't be any majors that would be impacted by that.
No.
And it just seems like kind of just worked out well with how the games were scheduled. We're just same time they're doing a practice for minors, so that worked out well. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they were actually having issues with.
We'll look into that one further.
Seems like there's a few on here that are in regards to soccer. So I'm assuming there's a separate bullet point, right? Okay.
Yeah, separate
I'll wait
items
for
that
that.
we'll discuss.
One thing is I'll make a comment on the March 21st complaint from Randy Waters. That's a fair call out from his perspective. When we did the practices and game scheduling with Todd Davis, the way we did is we had the majors go up first. They picked their practice time and game time at the same time. And then when they were done, the minors followed afterwards to pick a game time and a practice time. But with Randy, who picked first overall in the draft, he ended up picking last for practice and game times. So the only thing that was left for him was Fridays and Saturdays, and just by coincidence. And that's where I think the process was maybe not as handled well, or maybe it should have been where everybody picks their practice time first, so we could have a chance of a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. But the way it was left, some coaches, they picked a a game time and a practice time both on the weekdays, on a weeknight. So he kind of got the short end of the stick, but that was just a consequence of how it was administered, the scheduling when we did that with Todd Davis.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in item number 8.
Okay.
I figured, okay. So the reason why the fields weren't available on March 8th is actually, it was opening day. So we had scheduled the rookies on both fields, B and C. Since the games weren't able to start until 11, that pushed everything back. So it wasn't the minors, that was my mistake. It was the rookies.
Okay. And then the last one on this page, March 25th, is that also one that's going to be discussed on the letter agenda item? Okay. Now, for this being new, where we're doing the monthly communication log, it'd be appropriate to give the audience a chance to comment or anything? Okay. So before we do that, is there any additional comments or questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, we'll open up the floor for the audience to make any comments on this communication log.
My name is Erin Calderon. I'm a 10U coach, and I'm the one that complained about the girls' visors. I think they just kind of looked really cheap, and I don't think those ever would have been turned over to the boys. Like, I understand they weren't as simple to find, but I helped assist in a coach like multiple years ago, and they were like actual college ones. So I know that obviously we can't find the same things now, and I understand that. I just think that we should kind of care about presenting the girls as well as we care about presenting the boys, and I think it should matter because personally I would love to build a great girls program to feed our high school and to build confidence and all of those things. And I just feel like it looked like there wasn't as much care on both sides. And that's why I decided to say something about it. And I did have parents bring it to me. Like, I didn't just decide on myself. I waited to see without saying anything to see what parents said. And in my text thread, I did have parents acknowledging how their sons had different hats from what their girls had received. And that's why I decided to bring it up to this. And I just think we should consider it in the future.
Well, that's fair.
Thank you.
And I think it's a fair comment. You know, we should be, especially I think about, I think it's true, right? I think the boys are sometimes picky with the jerseys and how things are set up, jerseys and hats. So I think it's a fair call out. And sometimes, you know, I think with the difficulty, maybe finding the visors, I wonder if it could be a difficulty with maybe the price point we're looking for to spend on jerseys and hats. And maybe when we do our fee schedules, we need to maybe adjust the fees to be able to buy it appropriately. Because I would think it's not that difficult to buy, but if there is a budget that we're working against, then it becomes more of a challenge. But maybe we'll have to adjust our fees to accommodate that. Yes, go ahead.
Add to that? Okay. I've done like some screen printing, so I do understand a little bit how that business works. And just to kind of like throw that out there, like, I do think that you could simplify the uniforms in ways of like do like Escalon rec on their shirts in the team colors, and then do like the actual team visor or hat, and you would probably save setup fee and different types of fees associated with her making screens for multiple different teams for the shirt. And so that could possibly be a way where you could do it all.
Offset.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I might ask a question of just the visors. Was it not being able to get the logo, or was it also the actual inch space of the visor this year?
From when we spoke with Anna Baker, she said that the price point was different, right? Because the shirts they had to be custom made. The visors not having a logo kind of offset the price.
That's fair, yeah. Any other comments or questions from the audience or the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, review and discuss 2025 basketball season survey, parents and coaches.
Okay, communication and feedback. I think what we want to continue to do is communicate and receive feedback. So after each sport, we will do a sport-specific survey to parents separately from coaches. And as you will see in your packet, we have the results from both of those surveys. And there's many pages in here. We did have a chance to summarize the pages, and we can go over that. We had 11 responses from coaches and 26 responses from parents. So not a bad result. We'd love to see more, of course. Obviously, there's many more parents. There's even a few more coaches. So we'd love to get more feedback. I'll start with the parents. Overall experience, not bad, just 3.69, I think, a little under 4. And again, this was for basketball. There were some questions, thoughts, concerns about communication with parents and then scheduling. A lot of comments about scheduling. Most had a good interaction, I guess, or a good response about the program, but did talk about kind of the scheduling of the games and practices. We actually received a lot of questions about practices. Historically, we haven't provided practice opportunities because we don't have the available facilities. We really rent out that facility for the day and don't have use for it otherwise. We know coaches will ad hoc do practices where they can find a location, but it's not uniform across the program, like with the other ones where we do have facilities to provide practice space for them. So that was a big one for both the coaches and the parents in basketball. And it really is like a quirk of that season. Facilities and equipment, mixed feelings, of course, about the old gym. Everyone knows it and loves it, but it's not the greatest facility. It's small. It's tight for viewers, and there were some comments about it. Let's see. Few comments about the length of games, too short of games, too short of time frames for everyone. A lot of comments about consistent refereeing. And so you see, from week to week different, older to younger different. And so that is one of the things that we've started to look into. And one of the things this commission talked about last time, sort of having an overall vision for the refereeing and sitting down the refs and kind of telling them how we want the season to go. Most said they would come back again. And then if you talk about the coaches, let's see, a better experience with the coaches, 4.45 out of 5. That's good. 4.36 communication from the league. Again, scheduling much lower than the sort of average of everything else. Support and resources. There was some thoughts about the temporary hoops and the permanent hoops in the gym and the ones that we provide. Kind of equipment upgrades, equipment quality. There was some concerns about that. Parent involvement was rated very high. About 80% said they would return to coach again. 2 said maybe and 1 said no, so that's not too bad. Again, their top suggestions or thoughts were consistent refereeing, practice facilities, longer and clearer games with better equipment, condensed or reorganized age division. We have the kind of 3-year gap thing. And then more collaboration between coaches and ref through season, but that's really about consistent refereeing. So that's the summary of the survey. Happy to dive into anything you want or any individual comment.
A couple things stood out to me as quick wins, if I could bring them up. A digital clock in the gym so that we could see actual quarters halftime would be awesome. And it seems like, I guess I could sit here and say it's easy. I don't know what it would take to have one that we could bring into the gym. Because that was hard. I feel like we all had different times. I had what I had on my iPhone. The refs had their own, and it wasn't kind of fully communicated. staggering picture times. Seems to come up quite a bit. I don't know if pictures have to start that early. I don't know. I don't do that part, but 7 a.m. is pretty rough because that's earlier than any game you would have, especially for littles.
Yeah.
Is staggering and early, is that two separate issues?
I meant staggering, like change it, sorry. I mean, doing the picture time later, not having them be so early in the morning. Because that's earlier even than a school day, that age of child.
Historically, it's been done before games so that, they're presentable in the pictures. It's definitely doable to do them after.
You have to be in that facility, sorry.
They don't have to be in the facility. It's just easier since everyone's there.
I think before games means, so if you have an 8 o'clock game, you're taking a 7 o'clock picture, so you're not sweaty,
Messed up, yeah.
Jersey ripped, all that type of thing. So if there's an 8 o'clock game, then they start at 7 to take their pictures, get through pictures, practice, and then game.
So we don't have practices for this sport. Is there a way to do like a weeknight 5 to 7 slot of pictures? Multiple teams.
It would have to be divided into multiple days. Yeah.
Just trying to throw things out there.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good discussion. It's just not as efficient for the photographer, which, of course, we can accommodate. It's just going to be a higher price point, and again, that's not too big a deal either. You push something, and it's like the balloon. There's another issue that comes out. We just got to figure out what's the right mix.
I do want to second that comment on the having some type of time clock there for the old gym. This year I was coaching also the a starter division, which is in the upper tail gym, and that had a scoreboard and also a timer, and that was nice because sometimes you'll try to call timeout, do a rotation after a certain amount of minutes, so you can see it there just to ensure that's right. But as Commissioner Hogan was mentioning, when you have your own time that you're keeping, maybe matches the refs or not, but you're trying to do that just to ensure that, you're trying to divide the playing time with the kids correctly. And with that, maybe you need like someone to keep track of time, but then just times too, you might forget, like, hey, did anybody start the timer? And so you're not sure exactly when to do a sub, but something like that would be great. The nice thing too is it seems like with that division, when you go to the GVs and younger, when you do call a timeout, it doesn't really stop the time clock. So you still have one time clock for both games. And so it seems like wouldn't be that challenging to do that, even if it's a small time clock, just to have something there where people can just see that there's the time clock and can do adjustments or substitutions correctly. And then just another comment too on just the feedback on the practices. I think that's fair. I know we say there's a practice before the game, but when it's only 15 minutes, it's really more just like a warm up and kind of stretching. It's really what it is. Mm-hmm. So it's not really a practice. So it's fair to say that as you do the Escalon basketball program, there's no practices. You go to the game, have your warm up, and then you do a game. And in the game, you're not really taking the time to coach or teach. The rest might stop something here and there, just talk about how to do free throws or how to line up. But really, not really. It's like a coaching moment. We're just playing the game in that situation. But it would be nice though if there could be some kind of practices, even if we do something where instead of the league being just like 6 weeks, maybe you do something where you make it 7 weeks, and one of those weeks is actually like a practice. You get an hour to yourself just to practice. And whether you do that on a weeknight or a Saturday, maybe one Saturday there's no games, it's just a practice. Just something that way there's an opportunity for the coaches to have the opportunity to try to coach. Even if it's an hour, it'd be a lot more than I think what most coaches might be doing, which could be 0, unless they're trying to schedule a time at the park or try to somehow go through the fence at Upper Teller to practice there. But it would be a good opportunity to have that, because I feel like that is a struggle for the coaches to do that. Some of them even try to have it at their house with one of their basketball hoops that they have outside that's on the sidewalk. But But I think there is just a need, even if it was one practice, because that's always the challenging, it wasn't so much like the last 2 years, but the years before for basketball, you'd have pictures in the first game on the same day, and a lot of times the first time you meet your team, so you'd go out there and say, all right, hey, I'm Coach Danny, all right, let's go take pictures, all right, let's go run back after a game, and that was it. It's almost kind of awkward that you don't even have a practice or a time to really talk. So I think even if it was just one practice, I think it would go a long way, because even if that could be just an icebreaker to the team to get together. But yeah, no, it would be good if we could do something like that for the teams, even if it's just 1 hour that they get.
And maybe make a note for next year that, like, for our 4 and 5-year-old team, we had a double 2 games the week of President's Week where we were off of school. So maybe be cognizant of that, of potentially doing 2 games a different week rather than President's Week when the kids are out of school.
If I may, so the schedule is kind of given to us by the high school.
Got it.
We go off of what's available, right? So unfortunately, we would love to have, I would have loved to be able to do 1 week, a game a week. It wasn't possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully next year we can, but because we're at the mercy of their availability, we have to go off of what they offer.
Yeah, and then my other comment for the 4 or 5-year-olds was we had a pretty long practice session and a 15-minute game. And then it was 7, 8 kids. I saw a note in there too that it was 7 kids on the court, and it was pretty hectic. It was like rugby out there rather than basketball. So,
Is there a way to look at, I mean, there's multiple comments on the distribution of ages too. I know that we kind of go by the NBA junior or whatever that's called, sorry. But is there a way to like reevaluate that maybe before next season and see? That's one thing I noticed a few times in there. And it seems maybe mostly younger. I was trying to read it and listen, sorry. But other thing, like they were saying, it seems that maybe if there was some way to work out a practice, or we shorten the practice so the games are longer, because it seems that's mentioned quite a few times that the games are too short and it doesn't seem as worthwhile as it should be. So maybe that's something to look into. We kind of talked about picture day already. I kind of had the same idea, and some parents were wondering if we could do it a weeknight, but that makes sense why it wouldn't be efficient. Again, we kind of talked about the refs, but that seems to be that's repeated in here a lot. And as a coach, I kind of felt that too. We would get one that was like really spot on and one that was kind of just like maybe too nervous to say something, whatever the case may be. But because we're so limited on practice, we kind of rely on refs to help teach the game to these little kids and get them like consistent and understanding. So that would be something I think we need to look into. I know we have the high school students, but maybe there's some type of, it adds more, but is there a way to either add paid refs or give them some type of set of rules and maybe a little pre-training? So those would be what I gather from my quick review. But
If I could add to that, I think it's a fair call out, especially for the JV division. I'm not sure what kind of issues maybe they had at the younger division. A little more challenging, I think, with that younger, maybe to follow rules, even to help it dribble. But I felt like, at least for the JV division, not so much that I think the coaches, or I'm sorry, the refs didn't know the rules, but it's just that they're hesitant to blow a whistle or how to control it. And so sometimes they're kind of asking coaches like, hey, do you want to call double dribbles or not? Do you want to, the kids run with it, do you want to call it or not? So they're asking for the coaches for kind of their opinion. But I think there's, a certain point where at that age, 7, 8-year-olds, maybe it could be challenging a little bit for dribbling. But the next age group, the 9, 10, 11-year-olds, they're calling, the rest are calling if you do any kind of dribbling, any carrying of the ball, they're calling it right away. So it would be good to kind of help out the kids at that age division where the refs could be a little more confident with blowing the whistle or just to ensure there's anything coming out of control. Especially there's one comment here saying that sometimes the games are kind of like rugby, and that the refs aren't stopping it. And that's just part of, I think, that maybe that comfort level that they may lack, the high school refs, to blow in the whistle to keep things kind of in control. And that's part of what they do is as a referee, you're almost kind of facilitating the game by allowing people what's allowed and what not allowed by blowing the whistle. And it can be kind of bad because if one kid's being very rough and the ref doesn't call it, well then maybe the kid on the other team kind of matches that same energy. And so you kind of get this kind of competing in energy until maybe somebody gets hurt, they're too aggressive. But again, that's where I think a more adult, more mature ref could see that and kind of just nip it in the butt right away with a blow of a whistle.
Yeah, these are good comments and good feedback from the parents and coaches. We'll definitely look at smaller team sizes for the youngers. You know, you usually want a couple of subs, right? Because not everyone can come and you rotate. But what we saw is they just played everyone instead of kind of having that subs, which makes sense at the younger age group. So we'll look at maybe just having 5 or 6 instead of 7 on the team. And maybe it's 5. So we'll look at that. Of course, that's going to make more teams, affect some of the schedule, but we'll definitely look at that one. I think we'll do the ref guidance, you know, kind of sit down with the high school and the professional refs in basketball and kind of talk about expectations and philosophy of the game and how they should be called. We can definitely do that. We'll look at a digital clock. We'll look at the picture times during the week, you know, not 7 a.m. We'll just kind of look at that a little bit to see, you know, what can be done there. And then the rest, you know, some of the rest is harder. The practices is just harder because we don't have a facility. We can lengthen it a week, perhaps. We'll have to look at the overall schedule and how it affects the neighboring sports, although it should be good on the back end, I think. But, you know, again, it's the facility, so we'll definitely look into that as well.
Thank you.
One thing on the facility, I had heard people were maybe practicing at the junior high because it was open. Is that something that we could potentially do properly? Or I feel like we've talked about this with baseball, but I don't know if we have with basketball to make more room and.
We're talking with the school
Got it,
district.
okay.
We're talking with the school
So
district.
it's
I don't
kind
want
of
to put them you know,
It's
like.
the
if-
same kind of, we're working on
Yeah.
that kind of, okay.
And I don't want to put them like, whatever you would call it, like it has to happen, or we're
Yeah.
having a conversation and they can say no for liability or safety or maintenance
Okay.
or.
So it's out there. and-
Yeah, we're talking about it. It's a slower conversation, but it's definitely a community need, and especially in recreation, to have more facilities available for the kids and the general public.
One last thing that I had was for the evaluations, we do it for baseball, but not for the other sports. Is there a reason for that?
It wasn't implemented.
Okay.
We're working towards.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback that evaluations, you know, they're welcome, they're wanted. So we are looking into how we can implement them in the other sports.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that comment was spot on. Like, I knew some of the kids and their athletic ability and 100% had an advantage versus coaches that had no clue who the kids were.
At this time, we'll open up any comments to the public.
Okay, my daughter doesn't play basketball, but listening to all this, I wonder if you guys could if you lengthen the season talking about practice time. I think practice time is paramount to actually teaching these kids the actual sport. But I'm wondering, because I get the whole facility issue. I mean, would you be able to do like a week or two of clinics or, you know, something like that, just to kind of throw ideas out there? I know it's not with this, but in junction with basketball, I know when I started with softball, I had multiple Saturday practices that there was an overlap. It's like the only seasons that overlap with softball. So I don't know, it might be advantageous to maybe push baseball, softball a little bit, give you that extra basketball time, and maybe get out of, like, how many games have we had to cancel for rain this season? It might be able to help both of those, like, sports. I don't know, just my food for thought.
Thank you.
Hello, Kevin Hall. I'm back. Yeah, practices, I mean, they're necessary, right? Like, the kids aren't really learning the skills in 15 minutes. I know it's a facilities issue because it has to be worked out with the districts. But if something can be worked out. I mean, essentially like at the high school, 4 teams could practice in one time slot realistically, right? So if we could like maybe pitch something like that to the high school, like we don't need a whole lot of time, we just need some time that we can get those, or even the outdoor facilities at El Patel, like better than nothing, right? Right now, people are fighting to go to the one park that has basketball hoops, type of deal. Referees, I think, is an issue across like every sport. And it's just the inconsistent with some referees are calling some things, some referees aren't calling some things. Some coaches are going to the referees before the games and saying, hey, don't call this, or hey, yes, call this. So I think it's a big thing that we need to like maybe have a referees, I don't know, clinic or seminar or whatever, and sit down with them at head and say, hey, here's the Escalon rules. Call all of them. Doesn't matter what a parent says, doesn't matter what a referee says, call them. If a parent comes up to you after the game, tell them that you're not allowed to talk to parents and they're welcome to email the recreational committee. That way you don't have the parents like trying to fight with referees. They can just squash it straight away. Like, I'm not allowed to talk to parents. And then the rules, we got to make sure the coaches are also following the rules. Because I know like soccer, like the little ones, like I'm really adamant on not having every single player on the field at a time. Because like you said, it's just like they're supposed to be learning to dribble and to shoot. They can't dribble and shoot if they're just being swarmed. And I had talked to a coach before and he's like, well, I just put everybody on the field because I don't do substitutes. I said, that's not going to work. Like, I'll budge a little bit, like we'll do an extra player on the field. And then throughout the game, he was like sneakily adding all of his players on the field. And I didn't catch it until some of my parents were saying, hey, coach, you're playing 9 versus whatever it was, 6. So we also have to set the expectations for the volunteer parents, like, hey, these are the rules. The referees are calling them. You have to follow them. We're following them. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from staff, the audience, or the commissioners?
No, just a really quick one, just that I like the idea about, with the clinic also giving that support to the refs with steps, because then that builds confidence. They don't feel like they're just out there on their own. So I really like that, to connect it all back, and they know they have support from us or whatnot. I think that's a great point to include when we are not setting the expectations and rules of game. I liked that a lot. Thank you, Danny.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to administrative matters. Agenda item 6, realignment of Escalon soccer program H division for fall 2025 in alignment with MLS Go and U.S. soccer standards.
Okay, this item has evolved in the last couple of days. When the agenda went out and as we were preparing the agenda, we had a different thought and approach than we have today. So we'll go through the original intent. We have historically done a school year age group. August 1, what age you are at August 1, like a school year, not a calendar year. Soccer is going the direction, temporarily perhaps, going the direction of a calendar year. So MYSA, if we link with MYSA in some manner, does calendar year, MLS Go suggests calendar year. And so the item before you was going to be, because we have received some concern about it, is, sort of what is the direction, and our recommendation was going to be to go calendar year. After the comments, after doing further research, we hear that MYSA and U.S. Soccer Foundation, or whatever, I don't forget what it's called, U.S. Soccer. Anyway, youth soccer is now going back, we think, to school year. So we can be inconsistent with MLS Go, which is no big deal, and MYSA, which really isn't a big deal, although we have a recommendation on that for this year. and stay consistent with what we think is going to happen next year, going back to school year. So we would just maintain school year, or we can, kind of flip-flop back and forth. If we stay with school year, which is now our new recommendation, since it looks like it's going that way next year, the following season, not this upcoming season, but the following season, we would recommend creating, we should align, if we're going to do the older age group at NYSA, we should align in the age brackets, so there's not this overlap. MLS doesn't start at the 3-year-old age group, they start at the 4-year-old age group. We've seen a lot of success, we think, and desire for starting at the earlier age group, so we would recommend keeping that. So having a 3-4 division, and then to align with some of the other recommendations, MLS and NYSA, to have also a 4-5, and then each 2 years after that until you get to the older age group, which is essentially 14 through 17. And we would stick with a school year. Now, the sticking with the school year is going to be different this year if we do have an NYSA team, because they are a calendar year. And so I guess that 14-year-old would have a choice to stay in the Escalon League or go to the NYSA League. So that's clear in my head, at least, because we whiteboarded it out. May not be as clear to you verbally, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have on that.
And you're looking for a motion, right, for this agenda item?
If not a motion, at least some sort of direction.
Oh.
Direction can be, we need to think about this further, or yes, let's explore maintaining, or no, let's, go to calendar year. If you give direction, then at least it's not just a staff decision in a vacuum. We've sort of vetted it through a commission. And again, you can ask for more time, sort of. But if you want to do a motion, absolutely, do a motion.
Maintaining would be keeping with the way we've had it in the past, correct?
School year,
Freshman?
yeah.
Okay, school year, and then that possibly is what the other NYSA is going back to. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, strong indication that next year they will revert back to the school year format.
Did they give any input why? Was it?
It's a decision that was made by the U.S. Soccer League, the governing boards, it's 3 different clubs,
Okay.
yeah, that are going back to it. This soccer program overall, in the United States, went to this birth year method back in 2017. We're behind, right?
Yeah.
So now we were looking to catch up, but while we were looking to catch up, we found out they're going back.
Okay.
So that's why it's kind of back and forth. One thing I did want to point out as well is that the way that the divisions are combined in other leagues are different from ours. The reason being is that we start our players at 3, so we group them into age brackets, starting at age 3 as opposed to starting at age 4, as the other divisions do. As the other leagues and other leagues suggest. MLS Go's program, their recommendation is to do, single years together. We don't have enough players to do that. So the idea is I guess the question is, do we stick with the groupings that we have now, again, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or do we move towards following the other programs where they start at 4, 5, 6, 7, and so forth, up to age 14?
Can you help me? How would it be broken down? It would be 4 and 5, and then 5 and 6, so forth? Is that what you're?
So if we right now we have tiny tots, right? Tiny tots are 3 and 4. After that, we have squirts, which are 5 and 6. Manteca, MYSA, most leagues that I've looked into, they start at age 4, so they have the 4 and the 5-year-olds together. They have the 6 and the 7-year-olds together, and so forth, up to age 14. Where 14, it's a age and under, right? So, well, not and under, it's under. So it's U17, but it's actually 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. There are no 17-year-olds, even though the name has a 17 in it. Hope that helps answer the question.
Just to be more consistent with sort of US soccer,
So,
it's not a huge, if there was not a desire for it, we can stay exactly like we are now, and I don't think there would be a big difference. But if we start to have these connections, one of the other things we're looking at is perhaps having like a semi-competitive opportunity after the soccer season in particular. So the more connections we have to these outside leagues, either through direct play and MYSA or these competitive, opportunities for kids, the easier it'll be if we are aligned in terms of age group.
got it. So my next was, this is a two-part, I guess. So if we're looking at maybe entering an older team, their season is the same as ours, or would the season be a little different? Because I'm trying to understand what you just said, because for my other part.
Yeah, the season would be a little different, as I recall. The MYSA season and our season is like weeks. It's a couple weeks.
Like overlap or like off.
They start, I believe, 2 weeks later.
So, okay, so then, potentially, as we talked about numbers and field space, if numbers grow, instead of turning people away, we could, if we align and we get set up properly, we could look at having what you're saying, like, instead of turning away kids because we don't have space, we could work on a semi-competitive that would play there, on their fields in that league.
Yes, we could look at locating other kids to other programs. What I was talking about is an after the season semi-competitive.
You could technically do both, kind of. I mean, it opens up a lot of doors but got it.
Yeah,
I mean.
in general, yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
I do want to mention that ideally, we would keep Tiny Tots because it's an introductory program, right? It's kind of getting used to, just in my experience, the younger ones getting used to being away from their parents, chasing a ball, being around strangers, being watched, and playing. On that same note, MLS Go does not accept 3-year-olds. Right? So these 3-year-olds would not be able to be enrolled in the MLS Go program, meaning that they would not be able to get the jerseys. What is suggested is that we keep the Tiny Tots as is, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Those 4-year-olds would have an option to either stay in the Tiny Tots for the year that they are eligible or move up to U6. If they move up to U6, then they would be in the MLS Go program. It would the Tiny Tots program would kind of be a spin-off of the MLS Go program.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. It was a highlight for our kids being able to start at 3 in soccer. So maybe that's just because that was the only sport that was available at 3, but they definitely liked starting at 3 years old for soccer.
It's a very popular program. Yeah, we have a lot of kids signed up for the Tiny Tots program every year. But then there are, those 4-year-olds who have been playing since they could walk, right? So they, and whose parents feel that they are a little bit more skilled and feel comfortable moving them up. So that option would be there to move them up.
Just to make sure I'm looking at the right one, I'm looking at page 38, the same one up here, correct? That has this is the proposal that we would be making a motion.
This is the proposal that was made, that we typed up on Friday. As
Okay.
Jalen mentioned, as we were looking into it a little more, we found the stuff was changing. So these numbers aren't going to be accurate, the qualifying factors anyways. The division name and grouping would stay the same, but the qualifying factors would be different. If we were to align with what MYSA does this year, we would follow this, these qualifying factors that are listed. But if we're looking into the future and want to kind of stay, then we would go off of the school year method, I guess. Yeah. But keeping in mind that the grouping of the divisions would have to change, because now instead of starting at 5, we're starting at 4. So unless we have a group of only 4-year-olds and then do 5, 6, the numbers would come into play.
It shifts it no matter what by adopting the model.
And I'm assuming too, right, you probably want some type of guidance or recommendation. The registration right for soccer opened up yesterday.
It's been postponed.
Oh, okay, it's
Pending-
postponed.
Yeah, pending tonight.
Meeting, okay.
Yeah.
For this issue, we wanted to postpone it, so there weren't a ton of questions that we couldn't answer. We wanted to at least give it a couple days to have this conversation, in whatever direction we got. So we postponed it till the 9th?
It'll be postponed until the 11th. That gives us some time to kind of make sure that we have all the registration ready to go, and dates and everything are okay. If staff sees that we can open sooner, we'll do that, but at least this gives us some time.
Can I ask, because I'm not really sure what this Miss Emily Martin, what divisions is she referencing that she's worried about?
So
That's what new.
originally, it's this grouping of ages.
Got it.
Yeah.
So she saw, okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Well, so when you go from school year to calendar year, there's that gap
Yeah.
of kids, right, that were born in the latter part of the year that may now move up to an older division. And so there was just some concerns on, my kid isn't as, not her in particular, but my kid maybe is not as good, not as big, not as whatever. And now they're moving up to an older division.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to just say, I was going to open it up for the audience. If there's any comments they may have.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I actually called, I was one of the ones with the concerns about the age. If you guys could consider, I think the calendar year would be best. My son happens to actually fall in that end of the year where he would actually be moved up. So I called because I was concerned that he moved up to the under 8s. Last year, naturally, it's a little bit of a harder year, one of those growing years, and hoping that this next year would be kind of the year to build that confidence. And when I saw that it moved to just the years, I'm like, oh gosh, that's going to be so hard on him, because now he's going to move up without his peers, which isn't ideal. And he's going to be moving up to an older group with more experience and bigger kids. So I definitely appreciate you guys taking the time to look into that, because I do think it'd be beneficial to stick with the calendar or the school year.
Thank you.
Kevin Hall again. So the pure age thing is one thing that I've never fully agreed with the way that the U.S. soccer runs their things, especially when it's something where it's a smaller town like this where you have to combine 2 age groups, because now you're going to have kids that have that 2-year gap if they're born in January and December. So they might not necessarily be ready to participate with those older, bigger kids. That's in some ages, that's a big skill development gap between that 1 year and the next year. And then also because a big part of the soccer program is building those relationships with your friends and talking at school or whatever. And if you have like the 15, 16s, next year the 15s are going to go up, and then the 16s have to stay down. So now their friends just went up a year. So they're kind of missing that year of being able to play with each other by having those two age groups together, two pure age groups together, and moving it. So those are just kind of the two things that I think about when I say pure age.
Sorry, I'm trying to brainstorm. If we say did not do this for whatever reason and we wanted to still be a part of MYSA, can you do how would that affect it? Or would it just would it cease that, or would it just make it harder because then you have like a second run that you're trying?
I don't think so. I think the only question will be the 14-year-old who is late in the year. But I think it's 12, 13. So it's just that one age. Everyone older is going to go to NYSA if we have a group that goes to NYSA. It's really just the 14-year-old, which, do we lose 14? I'm trying to think this through.
Depends on no, yeah, it would be,
Yeah.
depends on the grouping, how it would have come out.
So I guess there's a chance that, no, because I think even the 14-year-old, if they went to if NYSA's calendar year and we're school year, just gets moved up with them. So yeah, they would have the option be in our upper age group or their age group, the NYSA age group. So I don't
So
think
the affected group still has an option, and so the parents and them could figure out what would be best?
Yeah, doing it on the fly a little bit, but yes,
Yeah, got it.
I believe there would be
Okay.
an age of kid that was left out somehow.
I appreciate it, but I'm trying to look at it and make sense of it in this.
What can work, one of the things that staff was kind of exploring is having, I guess, essentially 3 different programs. Tiny Tots on its own, the MLS Go Escalon program, which would be, from age 4 to age 14, and then offer the option for those kids that fall in the U17 to travel to MYSA. If a child, my personal opinion, if they want to play, they're gonna do it. This is simply an option to keep them playing if they wish to, right? We spoke with MYSA, and they are willing to take a team, willing to keep them together. So essentially, that team that's formed can practice here, can be with their friends, and travel over to Modesto on Saturdays and play their games in that league. So this is essentially just another road, another option offered to our youth.
Or 2 teams if we get there.
Or 2 teams. Ideally, we have at least 1 female, 1 male team.
They would enroll through our platform, correct? Yes. Would we just adjust then the fee to match, or would we have them enroll for 70 and then I don't know how we'd fill that.
We wouldn't subsidize their program because it's a different program. Essentially, we would just collect the registration information for MYSA, send over the information to them. They would group our players together. We'd send over the registration fees, kind of just signing players up.
So we would just match, like that group would just match the minute someone enrolled, they'd know they were paying this higher, this 200. Okay, just making sure.
And I was saying, yeah, and just deciding, what do you go with, right? Do you go with the school calendar year? Do you go with just the regular calendar year? It's a challenge because it's, 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other. I think about, like whether it's baseball, in the minors division, you have some third graders are in the minors division, some third graders are in the rookies division. They're split. You see it in basketball as well. There's some third graders that are in the star division and some third graders that are in the JV division. Even in the way it is right now with the way basketball and the Babe Ruth program do their age splits, you split kids based on their whatever grade they may be. And the other part too, I do see where maybe if you do change it to the calendar year, maybe one kid maybe isn't ready for that division, maybe that's competitive. He can be put in the next age group, and it's more challenging. But on the flip side, there's, for every kid you have that, there's probably another kid who maybe isn't as good right now, and they're going to be ready to move up to the next division, but now they stay because they're in a different age group on the calendar year. So it's, it's 50-50 to who the impact is. It's just what the impact is. And so I think it's hard to base it on maybe parent needs or school, try to break it into grades, because you already have that split across other programs. But just so I can circle back, what is the recommendation you're getting right now from staff? Is it to stick with the school year calendar? That is the recommendation?
Yeah, school year, because of consistency with our existing program and consistency, again, strong indication that it will go that way across the U.S. next year.
I want to just kind of, sorry, excuse me. I want to kind of clarify that the school year doesn't mean grade level. It means the age that they are on August 1st. And so just like the rest of the sports and how soccer was last year, if you are 14 or if you are 12 on August 1st, you go with that division. It doesn't matter if you turn 13 the next day. That's, I guess, what we call school year, as opposed to birth year, right? We know that there are very young kids in grades where they're with older kids, and then there's older kids that are in young. So in a grade, there can be 3 or 4 different ages, I guess. You have some young, like 6th grade, right? You can have an 11-year-old, and you can also have a 13-year-old. It kind of just depends. And to answer your question, I guess the recommendation is to keep the Tiny Tots program, to do the MLS program starting at age 4 up to, I guess, 14, and then offering the MYSA option for the children that fall under that U17 category. Again, they would have to be, the U17 for this year would have to go off of the 25-26 playing year, which is confusing in itself. Yeah. But at least, like Jalen mentioned, those 14-year-olds will have that option to either go over to MYSA, which is not a competitive league. They're recreation. It's not a travel league. It's a competitive. It's a recreation. It's a recreation league. All the other players are rec players.
Sorry. Just to clarify, if we choose to do those age groups in MLS Go, but also we can do that and also choose to keep it school year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can.
I didn't know if those things were mutually
The
exclusive.
U17 would have to stay according to the birth year, but that would apply only to them. For the rest of the divisions, we can stick with what we have, but we would have to restructure the age brackets. Unless we keep the 4-year-olds with 5 and 6-year-olds. The numbers would be a little wonky, but it's doable. I do want to mention, I guess, and I think I've hinted at this, or I said it, that the Tiny Tots would have to get a uniform like the ones that we've had in the past. The players in the MLS Go program would get an MLS team jersey, and I believe that also includes the jersey, the socks, and the shorts. I have to confirm that. I've gotten conflicting information, but registration asks for all those sizes, so I'm assuming that's what it includes. And then the U17 division would have to go with the MYSA jersey.
Okay.
But we would be able to have the city of Escalon on their jersey, kind of like a sponsor.
Very nice. Thank you. If we make a decision, does it need to be in separate motions?
I think so.
Okay.
You could just spell it out, either staff's recommendation or, spell out each one if you want to go in a different direction with either of the 3 sort of facets of it.
Are there any final comments or questions from either the audience, staff, or the commissioners? Hearing none, is someone want to make a move?
Make a motion to keep the Tiny Tots and then proceed with the MLS Go based on school year and adding the MYSA based on calendar year.
All right, we got a first and a second to, I'll have to repeat it, to keep the Tiny Tots. And then for the MLS Go, do the school year. And then for the the Y is
MYSA.
MYSA, keep that as calendar year. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes.
And that was the easy one for the night.
Yes. All right, we'll continue on with administrative matters. Move on to agenda item number 7, review and discussion of proposed rule modification for walks and 10U softball.
So as you can see in the agenda package, there is an email direct from the coach who provided the comment, which outlines the thoughts and comments there. And I do not see that individual in the audience, so staff will provide the staff report here. We did deal with this issue last year. There is a philosophical question on when kids should pitch and when kids shouldn't, and it really has to do with gameplay. There are many who think kids should pitch as young as possible because they learn that way faster, better, and longer. And in theory, they're better players into the long run. The other side to that is the games can be mind-numbing. There's not a lot of fielding because it's a lot of walks, because young arms, maybe don't have the consistency to get the ball over the plate. And so what you see is a lot of walks, a lot of board players, a lot of inactivity is, this person's interpretation. And so last year, we adopted rules that had them pitch at a certain level. But what this individual wanted to do was, after a walk had occurred, to have the coach step in, throw 2 balls to that batter, and if the batter made contact, then they could run. If they did not, then they would strike out. And so this year, perhaps we would have liked to have this conversation a little earlier before we adopt the rules and before we start playing, but nevertheless, the question really before the rec commission, actually before staff, and we're bringing it up to the rec commission, is in this group, do we want to see coaches step in after a walk to provide those things that I mentioned? A little more ability to hit, a little more ability to field, a little more activity in the overall game. So that is the long and the short of it, and we'd be happy to answer questions you may have.
I was looking at just that second paragraph under the background discussion. We're saying, when staff reached out to the other 2 coaches, one coach said that they agreed with it in principle, but suggested the rule be applied only during the first half of the season. If the rule does get applied only during the first half of the season, how many more games would the softball teams play while the rule would be applied?
Really depends. Since some of the games have been rained out, we kind of have to see what's been played. I've lost track already. Different teams are at different level, different number of games played, and some might not even be rescheduled. We're not sure what that's looking like yet. But we're not even at halfway through the season yet.
We're at 20 to 30% of the season. So, if it's halfway, you got another 20 or 30% to go.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because if there's, let's say there's 10 games, and then we've already played, let's say, 3, that
2
means
or 3, yeah.
we played,
I
okay.
played one.
Because we've been laid out.
All right.
And we
Yeah.
had a Minnesota no show.
We're 10% through the season.
Okay, nice, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I was just thinking if there was already 3 games played, potentially 4, then that one rule would only apply for 1 or 2 games. So then I don't know if we need to modify it. But, okay, thank you.
Well, you could say that it's, the coaches would have to agree, so you could technically not put the half term on it, and then if that coach didn't agree halfway through, that's part of the rule. I mean, how many coaches are there for the, that we need?
3 total.
Got it, okay.
Including the one who
That
submitted the comment. Now, just to provide background, we have adopted rules. So I think the commission has 3 options. Stick with the adopted rules, implement the rule as requested for the entire season, or some sort of modification, half season, 3/4 season, whatever it may be. So those are probably the 3 options. I'll just say, as a matter of practice, we don't want to necessarily put the rec commission and you all in a bad situation. We're not just trying to serve up crud for you to, have to sort of take on. But I think what we've seen in the past and what we're trying to do a better job about, right, communication and feedback, is not make isolated decisions and really, trickle them up to the rec commission. And so I will just say that as a general caveat. It's not our intention to put you in the crosshairs or to put you have to make a tough decision. But when things come up repeatedly, we want to start having a broader conversation around those things.
I think the part that I could see being contentious is if someone is going to get a walk and then gets their 2 pitches and strikes out, and then otherwise would have been on base.
Great.
I could see where that would get hairy. I also feel that he's done some of the footwork already for us in the sense that he's spoken to the other coaches, and they both seem to be either partially on board or fully on board, is the way that I understand it.
I have Erin Calderon, she's one of the 10U coaches.
Is that okay?
Is there any other comments from the commissioners?
I guess on the baseball side for, it'd be the minors, like you're coaching that age, right? So like how are those or kids that are pitching that are like, is it a walk fest in the baseball side as well, or?
You know what, it's not. I feel like there are certain innings where there is a lot of walks, but it's more just giving someone an opportunity to pitch that may not be as good as some other players have on their team. But from looking at looking at all 4 teams, every team has at least 2 good pitchers that could pitch well and not be a walk fest. But with that, it's still nice to give other kids opportunities to pitch. And maybe they do a lot of walks, but you need that opportunity to be out there, whether it's walking or not. Especially when you're in the pitching mound, everybody's looking at you. You're throwing a few balls. You kind of need that experience and that exposure. But overall, I would say that's not an issue right now with the minors.
This update would only reflect on softball, girls softball, or it's across the board?
Up to the commission, it's been focused on the softball.
Understood, okay. The way I read it was that it would be just a softball.
I'd like to hear from the
Same,
coach.
same.
Okay, yes, I am Erin Calderon again. I am the coach that didn't agree with playing the whole season. I have played 1 game. We did play where we did the coach pitching at the end. What we did is if the girls had 1 strike, they got 2 pitches. If they had 2 strikes, they got 1 pitch. I struck out half my team because I wasn't practicing in that way. But I do see the benefits. It did keep the game going. There was, my fielders had a chance to field and all of that. But I do think that we're going to have girls in this league that are going to move up to, the next division next year, and we have to prepare them for that. I did discuss it with my parents before responding to the text. I would also like to note that I do think this is something that should have been talked about before the season, because I received the text at like 8 p.m. the night before our game. So that was a little not so great. But my parents kind of seemed to agree with me that, they're fine with doing it to start off. They understand the benefits of kind of keeping the game going so they can learn gameplay. But also, we're trying to teach these kids to move up to the next levels as well, and there will be some struggle associated with that, and there will be walks, and there will be, those kinds of things happening. So I think that there's pros and cons, but I think in order to continue to move them to the next level, we can't really baby them the whole season, to be honest. So I do think there should be some type of limit. I believe Ripon does half the season also, because I have somebody that I know plays softball there who said, so they kind of do transition. So I think it's kind of a nice meet in the middle. I have also spoke with a parent that their team has played the Modesto team, and apparently the Modesto team does not do that. They don't let you pitch it out, but they only do a 3-run limit, and maybe for next season, that's something to also consider, just because it will, move the inning along while also teaching them. But yeah, I don't think that it should be a whole season, but I do think there are some benefits, basically.
And no, very good feedback. I appreciate that. One thing I will say though, because I had the same kind of comments and feelings about decisions being decided before the season started. But I think when the season started, the understanding was that we were going to be in the Modesto League, so we didn't have the option to make any changes to their rules. But then we found out we weren't, and that's why this kind of came afterwards.
That's also been kind of confusing as well, the whole Modesto season thing, and then there being 2 teams, but seeming there's very different levels of communication regarding those teams, because I know my team is the one that Modesto literally didn't show up on Saturday. So I do think there's some confusion there, and I don't know where that lies, and I know there's probably a lot of details that go into it. But yeah, I think if we're going to play other teams, we should be on a similar page, but I definitely don't think that we should be doing that all season. We had kid pitch to prepare them for that, so. It also helps with what I can work on in practice, to be honest. I've reverted back to me pitching batting practice to prepare for them for me being able to come in and pitch, whereas before I was having pitchers pitch because they have to get used to that as well. So it does change the course of practices and teaching skills that are happening, out on the field as well.
Just one very small point of clarification. We adopted the rules a month or so prior to the season, and at that time we believed we would be in OBSA, which does not do the coach pitch role, and clearly does not do the coach pitch role.
And I guess too, the other part too, I think it is fair too that there is some time to get adjustment for the pitching, because I do even notice it even in the minors that at the beginning of the season, even some kids that might be good at pitching, they maybe don't pitch well for 1 inning because they don't have the conditioning for it just yet. It takes about a month or 2 to get the right conditioning to pitch that long, to pitch more than second inning. The limit for pitching for boys is 75 pitches at the most per day. But even before getting to 75 pitches, it takes a lot of conditioning just to be able to do that. And plus too, when I think about the team sizes, for the minors, there's about 13 kids per team. And if you have 1 week practice at an hour and a half, that gives you just barely over 5 minutes per kid to really work with. So the first 2-3 weeks, you're not going to get 2-3 pitchers all set up and ready to go. So I can definitely see whether it's the minors, even the softball, where there could be opportunities where you need just some time to actually finally develop some pitchers and have them be consistent enough with arm strength and conditioning to do it to pitch well.
What's a typical game run season for softball? If we just had to say the number of games, not counting rainouts.
10 to 12.
So if we were to say half of a season, we would say reliably 5 or 6, the first 5 or 6 games.
That also depends on if the games are played, if they're not played, if they're not rescheduled, if they're rained out.
Are there any other comments from staff the commissioners or the audience?
Just a thought. The girls, the softball team, the high school softball team, did a clinic recently, a fundraiser, and it was phenomenal. Like our daughter loved it. I mean, it was like they were out there with a bunch of superstars, and so I don't know if it'd be maybe softball pitching is very unnatural. It's when Danny talks about the boys, I mean at least you're throwing overhand. That's the way you naturally throw. But I mean, I couldn't even dream of, actually doing a legitimate softball pitch. So I don't know if it'd be, like reaching out to Coach Brooks at the high school and see if there would be some maybe even just even if it was just pitching clinics for some of the girls and that they did. I mean, they paid, it was $25 that they did for, but maybe you could get for nothing. I don't know, just to have them come out and help and kind of do some early season pitching development or something like that, where they could at least kind of get off to a good start, get some fundamentals of the mechanics and how everything's supposed to look, going into, because like Danny said, once they'll start getting a groove after a bit and they figure out how everything needs to feel and get that muscle memory. But, maybe there's something like that could be done earlier in the season or potentially even before the season, kind of like a Todd Davis thing with the clinic, kind of deal, but like actually have one that's legit, have a few girls that actually pitch for the high school, and maybe there'd be something like that could help, and speed those games along without having to go outside of the normal rules or different things like that. So just a thought.
Maybe developmentally, the younger age group, the tail end of the season, if they can maybe practice pitching at the tail end of their season to prepare them when they move up, so that it's not a completely new concept. I don't know if that young of an age can pitch an inning, or the older kids that are moving up, that might be an option as well.
Do we give guidance on selecting pitchers, or is that completely up to
The coaches.
Coaches.
Yeah. So most of I'll say a lot of the coaches kind of have a feel for who is a pitcher, but not everyone does. Yeah.
In relation to the pitching, obviously with everything else, it's about practice. And so obviously some of these girls can't practice a lot at home. I mean, it's hard, time constraints. The fact that we can only practice one day a week makes it kind of difficult as well. And I know that that's like an ongoing issue, but we might as well just put it out there again. It's hard when you just have like one practice a week. And yes, we can practice in the grass and we can practice in the dirt, but it's different when you're practicing on a mound and you're making that mound what you need, and different things like that. I was fortunate to have one practice where the 14U girls team was there to do batting practice, and she actually let my catchers and pitchers work with her catchers and pitchers, and they learned a lot from that one time. But it also was centered around like them making their line and working with the mound in different ways that you can't just practice anywhere. So just a little food for thought too, for the future.
Thank you.
I assume from the first page that this, what the motion or what we pass, we review this annually. So if we want to work on some of the suggestions, we may not need it next year and it can be reviewed. Is that what I read? Or is this going to be it?
We adopted a set of rules prior to the season. This is a late request to amend those rules to accommodate this issue. And so it's now a community discussion on whether we want to do that specifically for the softball, this age group, 3 teams. You've heard from one individual, you've heard from another coach via the email that is attached to your staff report. And then the other, let's see, and then the other seem to be in full agreement, is what it says.
There's a piece that says the rule must be agreed upon by both coaches before the game begins. If it isn't agreed upon, it just reverts back to the original rule, correct?
In theory, yeah. Yes.
Just thinking, okay, so there's also that kind of fail-safe in it. as well.
So these sample bylaws are just that, a sample. I've looked at what other leagues do and kind of took what their wording looked like, and I looked at some leagues that do the full season, some leagues that do only half season, and kind of just made the word fit into the request and into what I kind of heard from the commissioners and what they thought, and from, you know, the other coaches. So this, again, this is, that wording is just a sample. The commission is free to, you know, to go off of that, or to come up with their own wording, or.
And I'll just say, I wasn't going to say, I'll say, when there's ambiguity or if it's up to the coach, there are different pressures, there are different dynamics that happen when, you know, two coaches meet. And so if there's clear rules, then you don't really leave it on that person to look another person in the eye and say, no, I don't want to do it this time. If there's rules, then they can fall back on that. And so I think that was a challenge last year as well. And so I guess our recommendation would be to set some sort of parameters versus leaving it up to the coaches to make a game time decision.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of second that, because I think that is important where you have these parameters set and there isn't kind of argument or discussion. Because you could see that where, you know, as an example, if Matt, if Commissioner Showalter and Commissioner Hogan are both softball coaches, right, in 10U or 8U, and maybe there's something happening where Commissioner Hogan is bullying, you know, Commissioner Showalter into agreeing to it. You know, you can see those pressures, right, as you're mentioning, those dynamics that play. And sometimes it's better not to leave it up for discussion and just say, hey, here's the parameters that we have, and here's what we need to follow. But again, right, there's suggestions where it doesn't have to be the whole season, it could be half the season, 3/4 of the season. There's options there where we can have clear rules, and with all these games being canceled, you know, staff, you know, such as Yvette can say, all right, when is that 3/4 going to hit, or when the half point hits, so it's clear for everybody when it's scheduled to be.
And as was mentioned out here, it just gives everyone clear, like if you're setting up your practices to, you know, accommodate a certain thing, then you get asked, you know, it's just, it's harder.
Yeah, that was good perspective.
Yeah.
Can we motion to approve an attachment, or do we have to line it all out? I know you said they're samples, but
Oh, yeah.
so we could potentially, I could say I motion to approve attachment 3.
Yeah, if you fully aligned with
Got it, and
attachment
then I
3.
continued to make sure, but
Or you could say, right, like attachment 2 or attachment 3 or attachment 1, but with this caveat.
Yeah, because I think, right, the idea of the motion in public meetings is to make it clear what is transpiring. I think that is very clear if you said consistent with attachment 3.
got it.
Or whichever one you wanted.
So maybe one thing that we could change or look at is obviously it's pretty frustrating, you played one game in 4 weeks, is we say that, do you guys play on Saturdays or is it during weekdays?
We play next Tuesday, but all the rest of our games are Saturdays. And then we've only played one Escalon team, so I mean, whatever you're deciding to adopt, like, we play each Escalon team, I believe. If it was like, okay, each Escalon team, you'll play this rule 2 times, if you're trying to ascribe a 50% point, you know, that maybe is a little bit simpler. I don't know.
And I was thinking like, hey, when we come back from spring break, which would be the 26th, maybe that's from any game played prior between Escalon, then that can be an attachment. Anything after that.
That's a good point. You're saying instead of actual, like, at the 5th or 6th game, you're saying after a certain
Yeah.
date, so everybody knows. That's a good suggestion.
Would this apply to any team being hosted here in the future if we accept this? Or it only applies between two?
So the wording, it's up to you guys, but the wording here is specific to Escalon teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's right on. I won't even say up to you. I think in Modesto, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would only
that's why-
be Escalon versus Escalon.
Just make
This
sure.
should be an internal.
Yeah.
Just wanted to double check. Okay.
And I think it's important to understand too, saying that because it's Modesto or whether, I know Oakdale's not in it, but whatever other team would come up, we'd have to do the rules that we agreed to. And I think go back to Commissioner Silva's, whatever we make here, is this now forever? Or it seems like, a lot of what we're doing with the baseball is still kind of moving pieces where are we going to go back to Modesto? Is it the county league? There's all these different things that we don't know yet that it's going to be coming up. So I would imagine that whatever gets decided today, we'd have to rediscuss it again for next year, depending on what does the environment looks like next year.
I would agree. Maybe I misunderstood the question. Yes, I think this is a one-season decision, not a
Okay.
sort of in perpetuity.
I mean, I'm comfortable, but I agreed, this says X, so we would need to define where we want to establish, and if we say after spring break, since it's, just this one season potentially, that work, I want to make sure I word this properly.
I think
Do you know
that
what I
would
mean?
be-
Because there's this.
Yes.
So if I say attachment 3, what do we, I need to define that.
I think so, yes.
When the-
But one thing I would say too, I guess maybe we could make one last call for there's any comments or questions from the commissioner, audience, or staff before someone makes a motion.
I just think that we need to be clear about what you mean as far as the end of spring break, because I know so, the school thinks it's Friday, but like that Saturday, the 26th, we have a double header. So I just want to be clear when we get into that, what are we calling
What's
the end of
going on?
spring break?
The actual
Yeah.
Thank
date.
you.
So I'd say like any games played after April 21st,
Okay.
no coach comes in.
Are there bye weeks though? Are you, is that cutting
the
out?
19th, the weekend of Easter, there's no games. But other than that, I don't.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve attachment 3, coach pitch relief for Walks 10U division, first half of season only, with the season as defined, first half being any games played after April 21st.
Second that motion.
We got a first and a second motion to approve attachment 3, where we have half of the games to be allowed for coach pitch and have the season being defined as April 21st as the cutoff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. Staying with administrative matters, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, baseball, softball practice review.
There's almost no way to be diplomatic about this one. So we did go through a different process this year for scheduling practices, for scheduling games, outside help versus internal. One of the dynamics of that decision and through the consultant's work was to schedule practices sort of first, really before most of the games. But then also what happened, right, is we moved from OBSA and we went into different leagues. And so there was many issues putting pressure on the practice schedule. With the move from Belpassi back here, that made a move to using the fields on Saturdays for games. Anyone who had a Saturday practice, sort of no longer has that Saturday practice. There were teams that didn't get as many practices just from the beginning by nature of the selection process as other teams. And so practices, candidly they're screwed up, right? And I think really if we had to summarize the thought here is, do we let it ride for this season and kind of let people figure out how to supplement or fill in their practices? Or do we at this stage in the season try somehow to reset? Anything you do, there's winners and losers. If you reset, there's going to be a number of losers who will not be happy with the situation. And not only that, there may be sort of downstream issues if we start adjusting things. If we keep it the same, there are clear losers, right? Who have just not got the fair shake in terms of practice time. So again, it's really, do we reset, try to start from scratch and reassign practice times? Or do we just sort of let it move forward for the rest of the season? Hands up, acknowledging, things happened. It's not the way we would have wanted it to, but that is what happened. It's not an easy decision, and we sort of get continued calls about the issue, and so, like we are wont to do, we want to raise it up to this group to at least discuss.
What percentage of the teams are having scheduling conflicts or not having a practice time?
It primarily affects the softball teams that practice on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. There's 6 teams and then 1 minor team, so 7 teams total.
6th of the league. There's 40 teams, give or take, right?
I think it's going to be extremely difficult to ask the majority of the coaches to change their practice schedules potentially when they've committed to coaching. I think that's a bigger can of worms than the 7 teams.
And it's challenging too, because I think we need to take into consideration everybody's situation and think about how it, or maybe one administrator, the scheduling of the games, practice wasn't administered maybe the way it should have, and now there's some folks, again, got the short end of the stick or don't have really the opportunity to practice. And so, yeah, it would be nice to try to rectify that and try to make it as fair as possible for everyone. But I guess it's how do we decide what is fair and not fair? Because when you do clearly see issues with some folks with their scheduling, now you've had some folks, other coaches, who have modified their care for their kids or modified their work schedule to coach at a certain time. So now do they have to go back and try to change that? Maybe it's not so simple to change it. So that's it's not a situation where all the volunteer coaches happen to have every evening off. It's not the situation. All the volunteer coaches aren't stay-at-home dads or stay-at-home moms that have that flexibility. There had to be requests from work or adjustments made to be at their current practice. But it's hard because on both sides it's a challenge. Especially if some coach. I know there's majority of it is in the softball, but I think again like Randy Waters, who can't initially practice on Fridays because they need to set up the field on Fridays. But it wasn't an error on his part, it was just the only option it had. And it was interesting too, in his situation, when we did first pick the games and time, schedule practice, the only times that was available for him, for practice and for games, was on Saturdays. So he'd have to have his practice and his game time on the same day. But luckily, some other coaches chose to do a game time on Saturday, which opened up at least Friday. But again, now that games are going on, it's a challenge to use the field on a Friday. And so that's not fair to him. They doesn't get the field time, as mentioned by the audience earlier. Having an hour and a half on the field isn't the same as just going to some other park and play on the grass. It's not the same. There's a lot of advantages when you have the field, especially with Dave Anderson, where if you need to have a pitching mound, need a tee, some type of equipment, the city's able to provide it there at the community center. So you're actually able to really do more practices or drills that are reflective of the game versus going out to some park. And who knows if it's even going to be available because it is first come, first serve on the other parks, but no, it's a challenge. It's a tough question, and I'm not sure if there's a clear solution to it.
So Danny, on this schedule, are you practicing at 8 a.m. on Saturdays, or are those games now?
Yes. So originally we were practicing at 8 a.m. Same thing with the Atlanta Braves at 10 a.m. and all these other teams. But now all our games were switched to Saturdays. We might have a Tuesday game here and there, but for the most part, our games are Saturdays, either 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. And so my specific situation also in the San Francisco Giants and also in the Athletic A's, we have our games either 8 or 10 a.m. on Saturday, but then we also have a practice time slot here that's on either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
For practices during the week, that time starts at 5, correct? There's no,
Well, each division, each field has its own, kind of its own practice start time. But for the softball field, it's at 5.
is anyone using it that you're aware of prior to that? Has any,
There are no reserved there are no teams that have it reserved for before 5. So it's kind of, if someone wants to use it, first come, first served.
is there an option to also offer then an earlier, like to reach out and see if that's a possibility to some of the people that are displaced?
Yeah, that is an option.
Has anyone gone to the 13-15 Giants or the major Reds, since they have 2 weekday practices, and asked them to go from 2 to 1 or flip-flop? They have 2 practices one week, 1 practice the next week, to allow the Braves to have a weekday practice?
I have. That was the first.
And they said no?
They were not willing to change their practice schedule. I will say that the 13 to 15 Giants does coordinate with the minor Braves to allow them to use their practice time. So, for example, last Thursday, they allowed the Braves to use their time. Yeah, so they are working together. It's just not a set practice time yet.
So it's week to week, kind of depending on whether, okay.
In fairness to those coaches, I mean, your first response is likely going to be no until there's, broader conversation and impacts that are felt in the community. And so part of this is, do we just go and have sort of a second push, or do we let it ride? I mean, I've been a coach, as Danny mentioned. You set up everything around your practice and game schedule, all your work and all your daycare or whatever else you're doing, you kind of have that locked in. So yeah, tough situation all the way around.
Granted, baseball is not my sport. When I coached last year, I had a pitching practice. So then we had a field day. So I'm pretty sure that we could offer them another field where they can go have a pitching practice as a option. And how far can we take it to say that we can push, but we can't tell them, unfortunately, at this point, we need you to give up one day, but we're willing to offer you another park to go play or practice at? Because that just seems very unfair. From the beginning, it's not been the best for everyone maybe, but looking at this seems kind of like there might need to be a harder push. There's other options. It's not like, I just think there might need to be, how far can we go, I guess, sorry.
Yeah. So
You're limited to 1 on the field per week, thank you, and then from there, we'd love to,
we're in uncharted territory.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
absolutely
For sure.
are. We can ask, we can encourage, we can strongly encourage, we can try to punish in some manner.
No, but,
Right? If people don't comply.
yeah.
But we're really in a tough situation. What we control and have always controlled is, sort of Hogan Park, and those fields that actually have the dirt, right? We haven't thought about or had to address the other parks that don't have fields. They do have backstops, but they're primarily grass. We just haven't had to have that level of conversation. And so we can push as hard as the commission or the council or whoever wants us to. It just, I don't know what level of compliance would be received.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, I think we should strongly encourage like one guaranteed practice on a field, dirt field, and then anything after that, like being Randy Waters, like it'd make me not want to coach again.
Yeah.
Not having a
those
single
kids
practice.
And him and, yeah. And it could be the wording, obviously the wording, but again, how we put the second practice option, it's definitely up to you, and I agree.
And then on the softball side, why is Tuesdays and Wednesdays? Are those games?
Yes.
From looking from us, is it something that you would need us to make a motion to only guarantee one practice night at the community center? Just kind of looking at what
We
you,
would have to look into, if we were to only guarantee one practice, kind of remove that second practice, who would take up those spots? Because the softball teams, there's 6 of them. They practice one day, I'm sorry, they practice for 1 hour a week versus the teams on field B practice for an hour and a half.
2 teams that have 2 practices, 7 teams that need additional practice times occasionally. Not every Tuesday and Wednesday are a game, so they will have occasional practices. So that's the you can't just pull one lever, I think, in this situation, because then you have more winners and losers. You get 2 practices, now you have to pick between 7 who gets those practices. It would almost have to be, at this point, a complete reset. Everything's off the table, then you go back and reassign.
interested to hear from, I guess, the remaining.
Thank you.
That's what they say.
The whole practice meeting was kind of wild because I think that the person who was setting it up had a plan, and then once they started picking times, that plan wasn't actually feasible. And so there was a lot of kind of changing of the stuff, because when we first sat down, it was like, oh, we should be able to do 2 practices a week, like 2 hours. Well, when it came down to it, it was practices also all day Saturday, and he went by order of the team, you know, the age. So by the time they got to 8U, I can only speak for softball because that's the only part that I was part of, there was like no weekdays left. And then the 8U, you know, coaches rightfully were very upset about that. And so then there was like a constant reshuffle where the times were getting changed and like trying to figure it out. It was also a point where it was like, oh, one day's gonna be game day, one day's gonna be practice day. And I think that threw things off. And so I think that there was a lot of confusion even from the beginning with practices. But it does boil down to you don't have enough fields for the amount of teams that you have, is really what it really boils down to. I think we probably could have tried to implement that 4 p.m. slot if anybody was capable. I don't know why they didn't try to offer it or start at 4:30. But if you have to reset, I know like I practice Mondays at 6. We come at 5:30 and we're up on the grass and we have 1 hour on the dirt. But like there's an 8U team behind me at 7. Like, I don't know, that 8U team might be willing to take a 4 p.m. slot if they're, you know, if it works with their schedule, because that's late for those 8Us, you know, and different. So there might be wiggle room in those ways, but I do think that like the way the practices got laid out this year, I think was kind of confusing from the beginning. And I think like you guys were probably kind of already in trouble from the beginning as far as like what you were going to be hearing from coaches and things like that. So, like, I think you guys were already in a lose-lose situation. But as a coach, I would be willing to have a conversation to try to make things work. I do think it's important for all of us.
I would agree with all you guys that, you know, trying to change anything right now is going to be pretty difficult. You know, coaching 8U boys and 8U girls, and we have one field day. That's it. We figure it out. We go to Sanchez. We go to other fields for, you know, do a hitting practice or whatever we're going to do. But more of a curiosity. I know that Friday's kind of always been like the sacred day for setup for Saturdays, but like, what is the scope of that? Or, you know, I know like Crandall is out there, and I don't know like how much cities, you know, public works guys or how all that works, but is there any possibility that there could be like a couple slots, maybe at certain times opened on Fridays to maybe alleviate a little bit of it this season? I don't know what I don't know when it comes to how all that preparation goes, but is that crazy talk or?
No, it's not. I mean, now everything's on the table. Just again, each decision gets looked at differently through different lenses, and now we're clearly in a different lens. Crandall is largely volunteer. He gets paid, but he puts in a lot of work, and it's just been the time to be able to set the fields. Now, the other decision is they're just not set as well. They're not perfectly lined, you know, they're not pristine, they're not combed, those types of things. That is absolutely something that can be explored. You'll hurt his feelings, but.
Well, I mean, I would even say, like, I bet you the coaches that don't have any field time would probably be willing to help him set up after their practice. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you get field time on Friday if you're willing to help Crandall out and, you know, whatever, you do whatever to drag the field at least and do a bunch of things so he can just go chalk it and get it to a point. Or I know that's a sensitive subject because that's kind of Crandall's baby, but you know, I just throwing it out there. If it were me and you said, hey, and I had nothing, I was Randy Waters, and you said, hey, you can practice on Friday as long as Crandall gets some help somehow, some way on whatever field you're using, where do I sign? So, just an idea.
Thank you.
It should be mentioned. I mean, it is something it's very personal to Crandall. He takes it, you know, very seriously, and he puts a lot of heart into it. It would be an impact. It would be an impact to him personally. It'd be an impact to sort of how we've done things. But we're also recognizing having no practice is an impact. So I will mention it. I don't want to make light of, you know, kind of Crandall's feelings or whatever. That would be a big deal. Yeah.
Or that, yeah.
So all good decisions, right? You start to then have downstream issues.
Yeah.
Right? Friday, like what we don't know right now is how that all breaks. We could say, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do this. You know, then a vet starts to get in the schedule and it's like, oh, crud, right?
Yeah.
This thing breaks or this thing happens. You know, we don't know that right now.
Do we know Waters' availability in general if we want to try to like make that our focus to work out to get him a practice time? Because let's say that we all agree, oh, let's work on opening the fields earlier for him at 4:30, but then that ends up not being something.
That doesn't work for him. From what I know, he prefers a later time because he works.
Okay.
He commutes, yeah.
I think they should have one field day, and if they want a second practice, then they can find somewhere else to practice for the coaches that have 2 days on a field. And then on the softball side, so that's really a bigger issue, none of those teams practice on Saturdays anymore because now they're games?
I don't know the full game schedule. Ours are usually 12:30 and 2, but I did have a Saturday practice time that I knew that once the season started was not going to be my practice time.
We do practice 1 month before the games start, approximately. So, you know, things have changed post games. Now, if you rain out, like sometimes we rain out and the field is not ready for games, you know, but it could be later in the day type of thing. And so, you know, there's probably little windows that people could capitalize on.
And no softball teams have 2 practices during the week.
I know that some of the teams, I mean, this isn't a permanent solution, but most of the coaches are able to make do and find a different spot. But this issue, you know, is raised often. So like as Jalen said, we want to bring it up to the commission for discussion, to get input, and not just that, so that I guess our coaches know that we're not just sweeping this under the rug and that we are actively trying to resolve this issue.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Showalter that having one guaranteed day on the field, I know that only solves a problem for one coach, but having a coach that had a practice slot assigned to them that no matter what was never going to be an option, seems like not the way to go.
I haven't read the email from Michael Patterson, but are you able to summarize his concerns? 'Cause I'm not seeing his concerns as I'm skimming through the attachments.
Sorry, what was the?
Summarize
Oh.
Patterson's concerns.
So he's not happy. He's not happy with the situation, alongside of lots of other coaches. His issue, his concern is the lack of practice time and having practices interfere with game time, or game interfering with practice times and losing out with practice times. There's been a few suggestions floating around, one of them being that we let Modesto know that, their schedule doesn't work for us. Of course, we know that's not feasible, right? We're kind of
So I think it's inconsistent practice times, right? Sometimes it's Wednesday, sometimes it's not. If we remember, we received complaints prior seasons for not having enough practice time already. It was 1 hour slots, and by the time you get everything set up and taken down, you're really looking at 45, 50 minutes. We already received that complaint, and so as the consultant came in, it was trying to address that concern, lengthening practice times, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, trying to give more practice times. But we do see we do have 40-something teams, there's just not enough dirt fields available to provide ample practice time. Some coaches are probably happy with only one practice a week, right? They're not impacting their schedules as much. Some want to practice 4 or 5 days a week. That's what they would do. So you're not going to make everyone happy in general, but clearly there's not enough field space to give everyone the amount of practice that they would like to have.
Is there that big of a difference between the softball field and the rookie field or the minor major field? Like, I know our rookie team practices on Mondays and Thursdays.
Last year we had some of the softball teams practice on the B field. Right? The dirt is what coaches seek.
Are you suggesting there's availability if softball teams use a different field?
Is there? If I don't necessarily want to give up my second practice, but if there's a team that doesn't have any practice time on a field, then that may be another option to go to the rookie teams and ask them if they're willing to take one day on the dirt and the other day on the grass.
But the dimensions are different, right? Field C and field B, they're different dimensions.
They're different,
So-
yeah. The rookie field is smaller.
I think your question is how much smaller?
Yeah, like,
Talking major or?
yeah, if it's 6 feet between the bases, then I'd say that I'd still rather practice on dirt than have nothing.
We attempted to do any facility use fees at all for El Portal?
I've reached out to the high school, to El Portal. We heard back from El Portal saying that they'll reach back out. We haven't heard back, and then we haven't heard back from the high school.
kind of when you mention the time, and I don't even know if this is an option, but is it an option if we don't take away a day that we say you can have an hour slot? And then that opens up a few hours a week?
I will point out that allotting an hour to every team makes it so that every team has a guaranteed practice spot, Monday through
Oh, wait,
Thursday.
say it again.
So-
I mean, because the boys are getting an hour
Boys are
and a
getting an
half.
hour and a half, but that would cut into their dirt time, right? So they would cut it by 30 minutes. If we were
Because
to-
you're saying they're doing both in one potentially.
So on B field, their current practice is an hour and a half. So instead of having 3 teams on that field, we have 2 a day.
We can't have 3, that's what I'm saying. Could we say that you could only have an hour to make sure we're accommodating everyone, we can only have an hour, or we don't want to do that? I'm just trying to think
That's
out.
how it's been in the past.
Yeah, that's why I'm-
As Jalen mentioned, there were concerns from coaches that there wasn't enough
Got
practice
it, got
time.
it, got it, okay. Food, thank you, I'm trying to,
I don't think of a Band-Aid. I know what you're saying for this year.
yeah, just to get by, but, got it.
Tough one, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if we motion to guarantee, I just want to make sure I understand it correctly, only one practice time, that still leaves the coaches then in the position though to kind of squabble for like, no, I showed up first, you had your guaranteed time on Monday, correct? Like, it's not like we're going to go, here's the reworked schedule. You have this time now.
But
I mean, some of the downside is.
No, that's kind of what I'm trying to,
There's 2 teams, softball teams that have 2 practices, right? No.
no
They're
so-
not.
no
Okay,
softball.
so there's
teams.
2 teams that we could give up that have 2 teams, there's 7. So we'd have to sort of do a lottery or something for that, those 2 practice slots. Maybe it would work itself out, because then the other fact is, can you even, is the coach even available, is the team available for that practice slot? So maybe that works itself out. Maybe you get lucky and only 2 teams
Yeah.
are available and they hit it naturally. Or they're all available and then you have to figure out who the 2 are. There's winners and losers.
it's the idea of possibly opening earlier, correct? Giving a 4 or 5 slot too.
I think that is a very simple move and has a lot of merit to it. We just open it up and say, okay, you can start practicing at 4:30. I mean, we can schedule it, but just say who's available to meet, who doesn't have a practice, who's available to.
Yeah, correct.
4:30 or 4.
And then we'll just, okay. Your Waters can't practice at 4.
I'm most worried about him, how he has no practice at all.
It feels
Yeah.
so bad for him.
Yeah, and that's what becomes a challenge, is even if we said, all right, we have availability on all the fields from 4 to 5:30, even if the coach is available, how many of the parents can make it there by 4:30?
Yeah.
And a lot of the parents, they work till 5 o'clock, then they gotta get off work, drive to practice, and then they get there by 5:30. And so it's, they're just challenging. And I do remember that last year, I think it was the Giants. I think Bonnie Kruger was the coach for the minor boys. And I think she had a hard time getting there at 4:30 for practice time. But maybe only half the team would show up to that practice because it was just too early for parents to show up by 4:30. And so when other teams came in, like at 5:30, mostly everybody was able to make it. But I do remember that from last year. The 4:30 just, it was a challenge. Even though it was scheduled ahead of time, parents and coaches were struggling to be there at 4:30.
I've noticed this myself, is that obviously the younger ones rely on their parents to get them to practice, right? As opposed to the older teams, they get them themselves, right? My son, he'll take his little scooter there. Other kids on the team will take scooter there. They'll walk there. It's a challenge all around, but I will say that the older divisions have a little bit more of an advantage, that they can use an earlier time because of that.
Just throwing this out. Why doesn't city staff try opening up the field at 4 or 4:30 talk to Crandall and others about Friday availability, and then ask again the district for additional field space. And just an option, and see where that shakes out. And then if we need, we can reset this conversation the next month, or, you know, in a special meeting or something like that. And that's one option.
I mean, I like that option because it seems hard to make something right now because there's so many pieces. Would be nice to see if things move a little if you open it up and then maybe give this, I kind of like that. I don't know how they would, the teams and, you know, but I don't know what else at this time.
I think that there should be some type of action before a month from now for Randy specifically. Especially with two teams having two practices.
Fair point. So I guess if we open it up at 4 Friday and the school district, I mean, in a week, perhaps, right, we hear something from the school district, yes, for this season, we can let you, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, first right of refusal for those who don't have a practice. I mean, in a week's time, this issue could be resolved. We'll share an email out with, you know, you all and others affected and say it's been resolved. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but it certainly could. If we open up some of these things and there's really nothing that shakes out that improves, you know, we can communicate with the commission and either call a special meeting or meet next month to see, okay, what are further options? But you're right, a month is a long time away. Long time away.
3 games left after our next meeting. And then, yeah, in softball, I think if we can ask for the field to be available on Friday at 4 o'clock, Monday through Thursday and Friday, and if the coach has to chalk the field Saturday morning, I don't know, I guess I don't know exactly what goes into prepping a field. When I was a kid, it was mow and drag the field and chalk it, and
Is there like a time he does it? Is it like during the day and that's why no one goes on it after? Is that, oh, got it, okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, you start games very early on Saturday, so you can't really do it before unless you get up extremely early. So it's sort of that Friday afternoon,
thing,
evening,
and then-
yeah,
Okay.
time slot.
and have we asked him if he could do it 7 a.m. Saturday for one field?
In a way.
Okay.
You know, he has his own life and his things and all of that.
I mean, maybe we just give him the option, like, hey, Friday we need the field, so
Yeah, part of what we'll do if we take this approach, the kind of 3 things, is we'll just have the conversation with him about the impacts and the issues and all of that. See where that lands. I don't want to overcommit, you know, but we can have the conversation.
Is it okay if I address the commissioners? Does anyone have a viable, looking at Randy's current situation, a suggestion? The commissioners, like, or any kind of proposed decision we could do to help him have a practice for his team?
I mean, without knowing Randy Waters' availability, I don't think that we can say, like, Reds, you don't have a practice at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. on Mondays anymore, unless Randy can say, like, I'm available either one. I think we need to know.
Also, it's also important to point out that the coach for the Reds has 2 other teams.
Yeah, I think the other part too, I think it's like I think as Jalen is trying to impress on us that it's not that simple Because you could have a situation where we say, all right, the Cincinnati Reds, they have 2 weekday practices, Mondays and Thursdays. So we say, all right, let's take away their Thursday practice. Easy, problem solved. But then maybe the Cincinnati Reds has a few games on Mondays. So when they have the game on Mondays, they don't get the practice on the weekday. And that's where it's not that simple. It's very, very complicated. There isn't. And that's why kind of reasons why we had these issues with, I think, softball as well, right? Maybe at the beginning it was okay, but then with the new schedule, it caused conflicts.
So you have games throughout the weeknights? It's not even just 1 or 2 nights a week?
Yes, well, I'm not sure exactly for the majors, but for the majors, I think they had some games on Mondays. But when we were in Belpassi, we had games Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm assuming the minors, same thing. I don't think there's any I don't think there's any major games on Saturdays for Belpassi. I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
No, they don't have any they have a few here and there, but most of their games are on Mondays and Thursdays.
So that makes it hard, right? Because
Yeah.
whatever you do to the Reds, now you've got to make certain weeks where they have no
They
practices.
don't have a practice. Okay.
That's
Thank
the
you
hard
for
part.
clarifying that.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, on that same note, is that some of the practices, some of the games that we've scheduled, we've asked Belpassi to allow some of the games against another Escalon team to be held here in Escalon, right? To kind of minimize the travel. They allowed that, so some of the games are on Thursdays or on Mondays.
The pickle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a Sudoku puzzle.
Yeah.
You guys could make an 8th day of the week.
Yes.
Or we can come up with another field.
Are there any other comments from the commissioners or audience or staff before someone makes a motion? Okay, with that said, is there a motion, or at least maybe a recommendation, if not a motion, from the commissioners?
I think a recommendation would just be to have those conversations, and pending those conversations, we can either have a special meeting or.
They're like the recommendations that Jalen recommended. He's not trying to overcommit, but I think it's fair that there's maybe something we can do, but it's just a tough situation. And maybe there isn't just a simple solution to it. The other part too, right? I guess you could have a situation where you kind of play back and forth where, do you do something like Cincinnati Reds, if they have a game on Monday, then they keep the practice on Thursday, but then the Braves can take the Monday when they're at a game at Belpassi. It's just hard because then you have all these schedules that he bounces from weekday to weekday to go to practice, and so I think whatever we can do to improve would be great, but we do understand that it's possible that Jalen may come back with no solution, no resolution.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Working on this.
Could we potentially, I don't even know, but based on how things play out, maybe check in with Mr. Waters and see when he has availability as well, so we could potentially help.
There's a motion. Need a second?
Was that
Or
a
just
recommendation?
direction?
It was just direction.
Yeah, okay, that's perfect.
Recommendation.
Perfect. Okay.
If there's no other recommendations, no motion, then the table is off to potentially next month or what staff comes back with on that. All right, with that said, we'll move on to agenda item number 9. Agenda item request from Recreation Commissioners Stephanie Hogan and Casey Silva.
So I'll just lead in. We do have a formal process at the council level, planning commission level, and recreation commission level, and even for residents, So 2 council members or commissioners can recommend an item get added to the agenda, and that is what has happened here. With the form filled out, 2 commissioners can essentially add an item to the agenda to be considered by the full rec commission. So that is the process that was undertaken here. And with that, I can turn it over to the requesters for their presentation.
So just a overview first of the agenda item. It's a proposal for, to the Recreation Commission to join the National Little League Organization for ages 10U for both softball and baseball and up. This will allow Escalon to play in Ripon, Manteca, and Salida, specifically Salida for the older divisions, those 13 to 15-year-old players, and have a governing board of community members. It's required because National Little League is an established nonprofit. And so therefore, it requires multiple positions on a board of directors that then would come and report to the Recreation Commission periodically, but also handle scheduling and oversight. Just kind of jumping a little bit, just the recommended motion would be just to approve information gathering and possible form submittal. This isn't a motion to say 100% we're moving to the National Little League. I just, myself and Commissioner Silva do not feel comfortable proceeding with any of it without having permission, because we have to start putting in submittal forms and requests for information forms that will have like our city information in it, and we didn't want to proceed with that without asking first if this is something we'd be interested in. So what will change, kind of hop into notes of questions. So what will change for parents? There would be a required board of oversight that has various positions, so parents could decide to volunteer for these. These are applied positions for the first year to the rec commission, and then from there, once the board is established, they'll apply directly to the board and have set term limits that the board decides after that first year. The game schedules for 10U and up will be done by a representative of that board, so it shifts game scheduling onto the parent group and community member group, and kind of answering some of the call from the last meeting where people wanted, it sounded like, more oversight on where games are scheduled, who they were scheduled with, times, etc. It has a draft and skills day that will most likely mirror the city's current process, but can change if the board decides to do that or to go that direction. It would be organized and run by parents, board, and volunteers, so that could look however the board would decide as far as draft and skills go. It could be having high school come out, teams come out to help volunteer for it, etc. A proportion of the games for 10U will be played in Ripon and Manteca. So having that radius of play be with smaller towns that we have quite a bit in common with, populations, well, Manteca's larger, but population size, mentality, etc., I think would be quite nice. There is a possibility, though, and parents should know, for a fee increase, the board does set the prices. You would lose that subsidy from the city because now you're offshooting into a nonprofit. So you would raise funds for that season and have a account basically for Little League. Enrollment may change from the current city platform, though ideally it would be worked out that we would just use the same platform, and it would push into the bucket of Little League. That's what they do in Ripon. For example, if you go to their website, it links directly off of their rec website and then uses the same platform. So it's a really seamless user interface for the person that's enrolled in 8U can easily enroll and understand then when they jump to 10U. There's an option, but not a requirement, to do fall ball. And I made sure to clarify that specifically with my contact in Ripon, just making sure, because that was when I feel like the heavily weighed concerns of parents in the past when we discussed Little League. They didn't want to have kind of this never-ending season. And there's an all-star teams option. What would change for the city? So 10U and up would be managed jointly with the board. The board would have to have someone, a liaison then, that would work with the city on enrollment, also work with use fees to mitigate the fee schedule and field agreement. The city would have to have a separate fee schedule and field agreement, and they could also counter and say, for the first year, we're willing to do it for this price so that we get you going, and so on. But there would have to be an agreement between the city and the Little League. The subsidy would no longer be required or offered. Questions and concerns that would come to the city would have to be directed to the board and board liaison So whoever it was that would take email questions or concerns from that board would be the one answering. So it would no longer be Yvette responding back. She would be saying, hey, this is the person you contact. Insurance is carried through the Little League. It's offered and carried through the Little League. And that's actually one of the primary barriers of why you can't play Ripon and Manteca currently, because we're not enrolled in the National Little League, who then offers that insurance. And if you don't have that specific insurance, you're not covered and therefore allowed to play them. What would change for us, for the rec commission, is applications would be reviewed for the first board, and they would be appointed through the commission, though thereafter they would no longer be appointed through the commission after that first year. Board representative would give updates to the rec commission at regular intervals or meetings. Coaching issues and concerns would be handled by the board, and the commission would be notified on a as-needed basis. That wouldn't be something that we would necessarily need to weigh in on like we would if we were overseeing coaches currently in rec. And the board would oversee baseball and softball for 10U and up. So for example, how we're voting on rules with 10U, that would not be something if something was flagged or brought up the tree per se to us, it would also be kicked back to the board like, hey, this has been brought to our attention. This is a big concern, what's going on? I would love to answer any questions sorry, I feel like I've talked quite a bit.
Yeah, well, one thing I was gonna say, I feel like over the last couple of years, we've had Andy Hagan come up here. You know, he's talked about, you know, moving softball to like TPR, or even talked about how we're going to the county league. But during this whole process over the last couple of years, he was talking about this change. He also talked about doing a baseball board with it. And it seems like, you know, even the Recreation Commission in the past has been aligned with doing this board. And it just seems like what's being presented here by Commissioner Hogan and Commissioner Silva, it seems that aligns with what Andy Hagan was wanting to do and how the baseball board should be, you know, ran and how it could be managed, and just to help with some of these improvements that we see. But I feel like it just aligns from just previous discussions we've had.
I might add too, they do give a board format, which is nice, not having to completely reinvent the wheel per se. They give a format of the required positions, ancillary ones that you could have if you wanted. So I thought that was kind of nice, not having to.
Going into everything that we wanted to do from when we met with Todd and all the stuff Andy said, that's kind of when things didn't go as planned and we started thinking and brainstorming, that's kind of what really drew me to this as well, because it's like that gives them an opportunity, all the things we wanted. You can build your team, you can coach a team, and, you know, have them grow together kind of deal. And it doesn't take away from that. It just gives more opportunities, but it allows us to kind of continue on with what the goal was. And I think with the board, as long, you know, we're doing it with the city if we work towards this and it is something we want to do. And like Commissioner Hogan said, we can hopefully work on facility fees, or like as we're building and getting, I think there's fundraising ideas, but to think outside the box and really grow it, because it is going to be something new. It's tired. We should have done this in the very beginning, guys. But basically, I think it builds off of what the goal was very well, and it still puts it in our court where we're not relying on someone else.
The other part too, I feel like this is also, I think it's timely too. In our last meeting, you know, when we had the big audience here talking about baseball and some opportunities that we had. You know, one of the big requests we have from the audience was to, you know, have the minors, boys, be removed from the Belpassy Travel League. But the other major comments that was floating around too was having a board as well that could be more focused on baseball. But yeah, no, I think it seems like it's just aligned with what, again, the comments from last meeting, and again, Andy Hagan thinking we should be going to like a board. And I think about all the other leagues around us, I believe that's kind of the norm, isn't it? When I think about Oakdale, right? It's not the city that runs it, it's a board. Ripon, Manteca, I think I'm not sure if there's any town out here that doesn't have a board.
Ripon and Manteca are both Little League as well, so they have the same board structure, which is nice.
Yeah. Especially I feel like Ripon very similar to Ripon.
When I did kind of picking people's brains in the community, some of the things, and again, you both have said it, but the like values and morals and like our small town feel is kind of aligned with, you know, Ripon and a little bit with Manteca, but, so that's kind of nice playing with other teams and families and such that kind of go with us. Again, what I'm told, and again, we probably will build our own, but some of these are just highlights from what Ripon's doing that we could maybe bring over with this program. They use umps for apparently like all levels, and so it's very smooth. And again, kind of like the basketball thing, the kids are getting the rules, and it's from an early age. You have that very structure. And then also, again, I don't know if this would be for us, but I've heard that it's very well organized. They're playing during the week in the practice times. They may have more fields. I'm just saying the highlights I've heard, but it allows for people to have their weekends. And just that they had a really good experience, and they were hoping for that in our town. So those are just things I wanted to share.
And I'm not familiar with the ballparks in Manteca, but the ballparks at Ripon are really nice. I don't know if you've seen those, what they have there. There, was it a Jacktone? I forgot the other crossroad there. But was it the Mislin Park? But that is a very nice baseball field. Even though I feel like a lot of times people here in Escalon prefer to play in Escalon, but if you get to play at Ripon, that really is a treat to play over there.
Talking with the president, John Cloud was who helped me graciously with information and information sharing and all of that. Obviously, there's no guarantees. The scheduling person on the board would be the one meeting with the scheduling person of Ripon and Manteca and so on. But the way he described it currently is you'd be playing roughly 4 away games a season, and those games would be anywhere between 5:30 and 7, depending on light, time of year, if the field you're at is lit and so on. And he said it's pretty nice that they sit down and really accommodate each other and do a good job picking times that work for everyone for their away games. The radius of play obviously gets larger as the age group gets larger because you have less teams. So as you're working up to and I'm sorry if I call it the wrong thing, but 14U, you're now looking at going to Salida. You're looking at going a little bit farther. So those 4 away games, for example, or 6, depending on, how many teams we have versus those away, that radius of play gets larger. But with that comes different experiences. Sometimes better competition, which it sounds like those older teams a lot of times are looking for that competitive edge. And again, this is just a motion to, or asking for a motion to approve the information gathering where we can formally put in Escalon is requesting to create and then start the process where they give us all the documentation of how to do that. And we'd represent with, this is now the current, kind of doing it like rungs of a ladder.
Are there any comments from the audience?
I think that sounds really good. Honestly, I think every town does have a board. I remember being a kid and my mom was on the board, like in Newman, which is a little town then. I think it's fabulous. I think you get a lot more community input and would possibly give the options to expand our program in other ways where we could fund more fields and other things like that.
There's no further comments or discussions from staff, audience, or the commissioners. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the information gathering phase, or I guess I should say motion to approve information gathering and possible form submittal to the Little League Association to create an Escalon and surrounding rural area Little League district.
I'll second that motion. With that, we have a first and a second to approve a motion to approve the information gathering and possible forms submittal to Little League organization to create an Escalon and surrounding rural area Little League district. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the motion passes. With that, we'll move on to matters presented from the audience. At this time, the public may address the Recreation Commission on any non-agendized items that's within the authority of the commission.
Said you'd always comment.
I mean, I will throw a random comment you can do this year, but like, I really think that if this town wants to get serious about expanding our our baseball and our softball fields and our what we actually have, that we eventually do need to move to having our own snack bar, which would obviously probably require boards to different things, and have games possibly during the week where you actually barbecue and do full options. I think families, it becomes, I lived at the baseball field when I was a kid. My mom was on the board. We literally practically lived there. I ate dinner there 4 nights a week. That's how they funded their program. They were a little town. We had multiple fields. We didn't have to worry about who was practicing where because we had plenty of those facilities to do that. I know this isn't anything that's going to happen now or next year. I know it's something that takes a huge undertaking, but I do think it's something that in this town, in this type of community where everybody likes to get together, where your neighbors would love to watch your kids play, but maybe it doesn't always work when you have an 8 a.m. game on Saturday or random times. You might get more community involvement and people we'll stay and eat dinner and watch a little bit of this game or whatever, and could possibly eventually raise the funds separate of just your player fees. But I'll just throw that out there because I've thought about it for a long time, but I never come to anything.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move to Commissioner Communications. We'll start off with Commissioner Showalter.
Yeah, so it came up for the yoga class that there was some double bookings of the Thursday at 6 or 6:30, whatever time it is. And I think it's happened 3 times in the last 12 weeks or so. So frustration there. I don't know, is the community center schedule posted, or how does that get, or I guess it's common. So maybe look into that as far as if it's 3 times in 12 weeks or so, that's pretty often. And then just with the practice schedules for all the sports and at the parks, if we could somehow come up with a visual, this field is booked and here's the availability for them to look before they go there. So I don't know how feasible that is to add it to the city side or.
There was a conflict with the yoga. There has been one. The other 2 that you're referring to have been communicated prior.
Okay.
This last one was an oversight.
Okay.
There's more than one person taking community center reservations, right? We don't always get to talk to each other, and it gets noticed last minute sometimes. So we're working on that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this happens when we book last minute, especially, unfortunately, celebration of lives. Those are the ones that we get on Thursdays, and when they overlap, sometimes there's not that communication. Unfortunately, that's what happened this last time. But I have gotten together with the yoga instructor and the other instructors and kind of set up a system so that this doesn't happen again. I am working on a calendar that you mentioned. The thing is that there's so many moving parts at the community center, so we have to kind of put it all together. There is if you go to Team Sideline, there is it's called a multi-field calendar, and that has all the games, everything that's listed. Practices are not on there, just because they're not. I have been thinking of putting them on there, but with these practice issues, it kind of comes into play where stuff has to change all the time, right? So it is a work in progress. Their staff is looking into making these calendars available to the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all that I had.
Commissioner Hogan?
The only question I had was in regards to facility use applications for specifically looking at Van Allen has really large, this is in regards to soccer, large grass areas. I want to say they have goals set up. We'd have to double check on that, but just wanted to know if there's a way we could just try to reach out to them as a possible option to displace some of the congestion that comes with soccer.
Reach out to them. So what, I'm still learning what the process is, because each school has their process, right? The official process is that we reach out to the district, and then the district reaches out to the school, but it doesn't always work that way. Some schools want us to reach out directly to them, and then they check in with their principal, and that's kind of where it dies. Others are a little bit more receptive to the idea, but we can definitely look into, see what Van Allen does. I do want to point out that it's outside city limits, so we kind of have to see what comes into play there, yeah.
I'll forward it. I wrote to the principal direct, and he would delineated the process. I was pretty transparent about what the idea was to use it for soccer, so I'll just, if I could, forward that to you.
Yeah, that's perfect, thank you.
I'll just add to that comment. One of the other sports that has a lot of congestion is flag football. The reason why that has so much issues is just because once you get into flag football, it gets later in the season where you do change the roll of clocks back, and so now it's darker. So now the only place you can practice is the community center, and then you have the youth cougars there as well, using half the community center. So it does get very, very tight, and there's an option where you can just go practice anywhere else. But that would be good. That could be an option to maybe, again, partner with the schools. Or one of the things that would, when you do talk to the school, I'm assuming it's going to be with administrative staff and also the principal, you might want to try to think about maybe some of the concerns they may have to see what we can do to kind of mitigate them. I know one of the issues that they have would be if you start allowing other folks to come onto the school after hours. You know, there could be other things that they bring with them, you know, whether it's garbage, or maybe there's some parent on the side far away that's maybe smoking a cigarette. And then when the kids, the next day go back to school, they may find something inappropriate out in there. So we'd have to kind of see how do we ease their mind that we're not going to leave certain trash or something that maybe some third grader shouldn't come across. But there's just some things like that. I think we'd have to see how we're going to address that before they'd be willing to even entertain the idea, because they got to put their kids first and protection of their kids before the recreation program. And the only thing I have just for just sharing is just that, you know, I'm coaching the minor boys, and it's going really well. And so I definitely appreciate that. The scheduling is going well. I feel like I think it was definitely the right move, moving from Belpassi to just local. It just seems like the competition is just the right level, where when teams are playing against each other, they might be winning by only 1 or 2 points. They're really tight games. That's what you're looking for, is to be able to go into a game and know that, hey, anybody can win. You know, it's not a guaranteed loss, or you're going to get, you know, blown away. That any game you go in there, you can win. And plus too, I think with that, the coaches are less likely to try to push to try to win, and really are focusing more on just trying to give the kids opportunities, whether it's the pitching or fielding different positions. I think they're more open to try that. And so no, it's been a really good season so far for the minor boys. And Commissioner Silva?
Excuse me. Just to say thank you for participating and coming. It's very nice. We appreciate it. And it was good to have perspective. So thank you. And I'm appreciating the comments. I'm glad you brought that up as a suggestion. The comments and complaints, I guess we should call it complaints. But I do like that we're hearing it, and it's keeping us accountable. I feel good about where we're going, and I think we're bringing up a lot of good stuff and having good conversations. So I just wanted to say that, and that's all I have. So thank you guys.
Okay, with that, we'll adjourn the City of Escalon Recreation Commission meeting of April 2nd, 2025 at 9:19 p.m.
Bedtime.